Welcome, and I want to thank everybody for being here this morning as the Wareham Public Schools goes through the process of explaining the fiscal 2013 school budget. Good morning. If you want to take one of each one of these and have a seat down at the end of that table, that would be great.
Thank you. Excuse the interruption.
Not a problem. Whoa. Okay.
For the sound.
Now, what am I aiming it at?
The laptop.
The laptop. The center button.
Yes.
Because the angle, it might not be picking up the
Perhaps
angle.
because
Yeah.
this is on that side.
Yeah. Wait, Terry's gonna get it for you.
Yes, that would be a problem.
Or I can have somebody sit there and push the button.
See if
Ah.
it works now.
That's the center button. I saw the red light go on. Does it have to be enabled? Okay, so we're trying now for the second slide, which talks about the timetable. And December 8th and 9th, all of the site managers, being principals and directors, came to the superintendent's office and met with the director of operations and finance, as well as the superintendent, and our executive assistant, Michelle Ruiz, and one member of the school board to go through their budget presentations. And that was the first look at the numbers. We added some things, we subtracted some things, and that brings us to today, where is the second cut at the budget. So the numbers have been changed in the accounting system. Some numbers have gone up, some numbers have come down. And this is where we are today. Now moving to the third slide. And
Excuse me, Barry. Could you go back one slide, Terry? I think it's important for everybody to understand that on the 18th, that it is a public hearing. We encourage everybody to be there by charter. Not only the FinCom, but the Board of Selectmen will be present, and we hope everybody will at least watch, if not attend.
yes, and that is, there are actually, that is an opportunity after we go through, like today, but it will be a shortened version of me presenting the entire budget. The public is invited not just to observe it, but to make comments. So, you know, it is public comment, and the school committee listens to that because we purposely don't vote that evening. There is a meeting held a week later where the school committee then votes the budget and may have some additional conversation after that public hearing. In fact, the school board will hear, the entire school board will hear this presentation on January 11th, and there will be discussion that evening. We do it again on the 18th, and then the vote is on the 25th. So, trying to move up. Now it's working. Except I went the wrong way. So let's try. Okay. All right. What am I trying to communicate? The money we have requested is needed because we have an achievement gap. You will see a slide about the achievement using CPI, which is a measure, a cumulative measure using MCAS scores of Wareham versus the state. And you will see there is a gap. and that our children need more to close that gap. There's another chart showing how Wareham has been funded next to the average spending above minimum net school spending, which, by the way, for this last year, for fiscal 12, it was 13% above the minimum net number. In Wareham, it was 1% above. 12 percentage points worth over. For this school system, that would have been an additional $2 million that we didn't have to operate. The state's current funding formula is inadequate. So when someone says that you're funded at what the state says is the minimum level and that is enough, they are inaccurate. That formula was put together back in the 1993. Healthcare costs have gone up double-digit almost every year, and through analysis, all the extra money that has come has gone into that in-kind healthcare cost. So none of the additional money has been available for classrooms and for educating students. And communities that want to do a better job educating their children have one tool only, which is at the ballot box to look at an override. And as much as most people don't want to hear that, it is the only tool if you want to spend more than what you currently have for revenue. It's the only tool. Or hard decisions have to be made, and you pit one department against another department, which I don't believe is the best way to go. All right, here is the picture that shows you the gap in CPI of Wareham versus the state, doing better in ELA than in math. You can see the difference, and that is the gap that we are trying to close. Here is the gap in funding from 93 through 10 on this, but I've told you about 11, which is the same. The gap is even larger in funding than the gap in student performance. And in my mind, the only way we are going to be able to close the achievement gap is to do something with the funding gap. 1 year ago, I proposed how to eliminate the achievement gap by fully implementing an RTI program, by implementing an enhanced supervision and instructional leadership, and implementing the Mass Core curriculum at Wareham High School. All right, what have we done since last year? And what do we need to continue to do? Well, 2 half-time instructional leaders were hired for both of our elementary schools last year, and that position was put in to add additional people to observe classroom teachers. That's about supervision and evaluation. By June 30th, our K through 6th grade teachers will have all had a 36-hour training course in response to intervention, and our 2nd through 4th grade teachers will have had coaching during the year while they were implementing this RTI program. The next steps of how we implement this more fully to carry out our mission is to take those half-time IL positions and make them full-time. That's at the cost of 2 FTEs, 1 at each of the elementary schools. So you take the 2 half-time positions, you make them 2 full-time positions, and it costs you an FTE at each of the buildings.
One full
One-
versus a half.
I have 2 halves,
Yeah.
and now I want to make 2 full
Right.
by adding 1 FTE.
Oh, okay.
All right. Grades 7 and 8 teachers will be trained, so we're going to continue the RTI training through the middle school. And the coaching during implementation will continue for grades K, 1, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Because beyond putting people into a training course, there needs to be somebody that comes into the classroom, observes, and coaches the person that's implementing the new program. What we've accomplished. Wareham was chosen as an early adopter of the new evaluation regulations for teachers, administrators, and the superintendent. Our Joint Labor Management Committee made a presentation to the Mass Association of School Committees regarding our pilot evaluation program. And we have ongoing training for our instructional leaders and department heads by a consultant from Research for Better Teaching. What needs to continue is that the Joint Committee, Labor and Management, continue to work on making our pilot system be totally compliant with the new state regulations. We need to then send those recommendations to the Department of Education, in which they will give us comment back. They'll vet it to see if it fits. And then we need to continue the training for all of our administrators with the evaluation program to make sure that it is consistent and fair. And I want to make sure that I'm not making an assumption, but very clearly what I'm saying is I believe that classroom instruction will improve and student performance will improve if we have the proper supervision and evaluation. And that's what this program is about with the instructional leaders and all of the training. Progress. At the Wareham High School, we have a new block schedule that was negotiated. If you either watched or attended the school committee meeting of about a month ago and you saw that we had 16 or 17 teachers come and speak during public participation about their uneasiness with the middle school schedule. We have an MOU with the Teachers Association about the creation of a new schedule for the middle school. We have a new literacy curriculum that has been written during this year and is being implemented by, we have a group, a committee that has been writing this of teachers under the direction of the Director of Curriculum, and that's an ongoing process. Next steps. The high school feels it needs an additional math teacher in order to make their block schedule work and have class sizes be where they need to be. We need to rewrite the math curriculum at the high school so that it is aligned with the Common Core standards. We have applied for a grant for training of all of our advanced placement teachers at Wareham High School so that they get more training and that we have more participation in those classes. The entire math curriculum needs to be aligned, and we need to buy materials for that math curriculum as well as for the literacy curriculum. Where is the money going? You'll see the one-page report next on the slide where we have the net school budget broken into its 7 major categories, and then non-net will be shown separately. So here we have the one-page report minus the transportation, which is taken off of this. And so the totals at the bottom don't match this particular document because this is only net school spending. So again, if we look at it, the major places where this budget has increased is in instructional services, in operations and maintenance, and payments to other districts. And through the course of the day, each of our directors and principals are going to try to explain where items have gone up in their own budget, and then afterwards I'll tie it back to this net school spending budget, but I'll break it out by each one of those subcategories, so district leadership and administration, which are the 1,000 accounts, instructional services, student services are under the 2,000 account, operations and maintenance 3,000, 4,000, insurance and retirement is the 5,000, and then we have leases and payments to other districts, which is the 9,000 account. So again, all of these documents come together and we will go through all of them. So at this time, since we started a little bit later, I would like to continue and go to the second PowerPoint, which will bring up all of our directors and coordinators and principals. A little technical break while I change PowerPoints here, please. If anybody hasn't had an opportunity to take one of those documents on the front, please do. And so I will yes, which is the next one.
Which one? Is it that one? You don't know?
It's just numbers them randomly. It's a different version.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
one.
the correct one.
Yep.
Yep.
That's the one.
So Terry, you want to speak from where you are?
Sure, that's fine.
Is that going to work for you, Christian, if Terry talks from there?
That's fine.
All right. So, again, this is where we have all of our coordinators. First person up to bat is Terry DiFilippo, our coordinator of technology. All right. And Terry is going to talk a little bit about Class B, A, and C computers.
First, I wanted to thank everyone for this opportunity. It's the first time that I know of that I've attended one of these meetings to inform people about the state of technology at Wareham Public Schools. Each year, we're required to report to the Department of Ed on the state of our computers. They ask us to classify them. They defined the classifications in the year 2008, is the most recent time they've done this. I think that's important to note. More than half of the computers in Wareham Public Schools have been classified as Type B, which is an average functioning computer. That was in 2008. And to define the Type B in 2008, they were saying that a multimedia computer capable of running most software except for the latest video and graphics programs. Okay, and again, important to remember that that was as of 2008. So they weren't even expecting it to be able to run everything that we need to use in 2008, and we still have over half of our inventory are Class B computers. You can see on the table here that we have approximately 1/3 of our computers are classified as high-end, which means they are, for us, up to 5 years old, not older than 5 years old at this point. Half of our computers are 5 to 7 years old at Class B, and we have a number of Class C low-end computers in our school buildings that are more than 7 years old. The next piece of data that DESE calculates for us is a ratio of students to computers. The goal that they would like all school systems to have is a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 computer for every student in the district. They break it down by type. It's a little misleading, I believe, because some of the schools have many more computers than other schools, but they take it as a district view. So at the current time, for our high-end computers, we have over 8.5 students per high-end computer in our district. If you combine the high-end with the medium or average Type B computers, we have a little more than 3 students per Type B computer. And if you combine all 3 A, B, and C types, we have a little over 3 students per computer in the district. Again, working towards that goal of a 1-to-1 environment. In the tech plan, they also ask us if we have a computer replacement policy. We do not currently have one. We are proposing that it be to replace 20% of our computers each year across the district. That would be approximately $150,000 a year. And our second goal, of course, that supports these computers would be to implement wireless networks side by side with our wired networks, which we are in the process of learning more about, but we suspect that that will be over a 5-year period of time, $80,000 per year to implement. And we want those wireless networks because we want to have a network that will increase in capacity so that as we move to a 1-to-1 environment and add more devices and computers to our network, we have things like bandwidth and cable access that will handle the additional traffic. And all of this is working towards the goal of our students being 21st century students and being proficient with the 21st century learning standards.
Before we move on, does anybody have a question for Terry about our technology department? Terry, there's a question on your left, on my left.
Town is in the process of spending some $400,000 on servers, et cetera. Will any of that investment that the town is trying to make into improving their information technology be of benefit to the schools?
I believe it will. I've been talking a little bit with Matt Underhill and Dr. Rabinovich, and certainly the increased and improved infrastructure in the town wireless and the servers that serve the town hall area will increase our network capability.
All of our buildings are tied together through a wireless network. And I met with Matt and the gentleman that had done that originally, about increasing the bandwidth. And that's one of the things today, that the more users you have, as we try to get to a one-on-one environment, if every child in this building, all 700 of them, were online, that's a huge amount of bandwidth versus the days when originally, you had one computer per classroom, which was for the teacher, and maybe you had 2 computers in the back of the room. So, it's just by leaps and bounds. It's just a straight arrow going up for the amount of use, and that we want to use technology as a tool. It isn't that we're teaching children necessarily how to use technology, but we're using technology as a tool for them to learn what they need to know and be able to compete in this world out there.
Will the increase of laptops that students have access to now at home have an impact with you here at school in terms of them using it within the building, or is that going to be restricted?
That is what we're currently looking into. We need to make sure, though, personally, I would love to see the students using the technology that they use outside of school, in school. And I think we all agree with that. But what we need to make sure we have in place first so that it is successful and that they can use these as learning tools is that we have the infrastructure to support it. So, for example, if we have a laptop cart right now with 15 laptops in a classroom, that's 15 laptops accessing the internet using our bandwidth on our network. If it were to be 25 laptops, because a number of students were allowed to, bring them from home, we need to make sure that that's going to work for them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Terry. We're going to continue now and talk about Wareham Middle School. Mr. Gilmore, the principal of Wareham Middle School, is right here. As we say in the business, come on down, Howard. And in the on-deck circle, we have the high school principal and high school athletic director. As Howard is getting ready, if you look at the slide, you can see that is the building that we are in today. And if I can remind people, in 2002, we began a building program for this particular building, and through a debt exclusion. That program was completed in 2005. The building looks beautiful. The building is paid for. The additional money on people's taxes, I believe, has stopped, and for that debt exclusion, and paid for in 5 years. The state ponied up its share. 75% of the money was paid almost immediately, and then after audits, they paid the rest of the money. So we received 89 cents on a dollar for this building, which was, in my opinion, a wise investment. But I was the principal of the building at the time, so I would say that. So, Howard, it's all yours.
All right, thank you for allowing me to be here. The probably the next slide would be that pretty much indicates the areas of impact as far as the middle school is concerned in the budget. And you can see that there is the text and instruction, there is a 21,000 decrease, but instructional supplies are up. And then the rest of the increases, with the exception of and I guess we could put the copier lease in there, pretty much have to do with technology. Right? And the following slides will explain where that money is allotted. Yep. First is the instructional supplies. As I said, the textbook account last year was a year of purchases of some texts, and this year it's supplies, workbooks, And therefore, the overall, if you look at those two accounts, the textbook is down 21,000, but the instructional is up about 8,000. So still a decrease. Computer supplies, Terry said it's 7 years old. I said 8. But the intent is to replace the computers that are in the lab. We have a lab for instruction and a lab in the library. And the intention is to replace the ones in the library. They're very, very slow. They don't not have the capacity to deal with the programs that we have that we want the children on. Where one is an instructional lab, other classrooms can't access that because that's in operation for the entire day, doing a course called the 21st Century Skills for all 7th graders. We'd also like to purchase 4 smart boards. And the 4 smart boards, 3 of the 4 would go into math classrooms. And it's part of the math program for it to be interactive with the students, and that would certainly allow us to do that. We'd like to replace the 2 laptop cots that we have. Both of them are aged, needing a great deal of repair, and are very unreliable as we bring them into the classroom for students to access technology. The question was asked about the students with technology. We do have a grant program that's underway where in a 6th grade team, they are using iPads. Okay, so they're as part of a pilot program to see how students can use them within the day, within a program, and they are with them primarily with the math teacher, but other teachers are using them within that particular team. And then the purchase of 6 document cameras for use in the science classrooms. Okay. That's the purchases, and therefore the difference. And if you look at the increase, it's $56,891. If you remember from last year, I came in with a request of about $58,000 in technology, but as we continued through the budget process, that didn't make it. So in many ways, this is an updated request of last year to go forward, and certainly one of the major needs here at the middle school. Next slide, please. On computer maintenance, it's just, if you look at it, it tried to be more realistic in that account. We had $2,000, moved it to $5,000. We're having a very difficult time trying to stay ahead of the repair and the maintenance, both with the computers, but also with the printers that we have. So the overall emphasis, as you can see from the middle school budget, is one of technology and trying to upgrade the technology so that it will be more in line with what our students need. And the last increase and impactor in the middle school budget is the copier lease. Anna can probably explain that one probably better than I, but I think it's our 2nd year of the agreement, and it just simply is $31,000 that we owe for the new copiers that we have. So that's different than the $21,877 from last year.
If I can, for the people who have come today, the 17-page document, if you go to
11.
page 11 of 17, you will see all of the middle school accounts. So that running this particular operation is last year was $4,979,000.
Dick. Just take one of each.
Take one of those and one of those.
That's the cord.
And if you
Watch out for the cord.
Unless you'd like to make a grand entrance.
Would anybody like to ask any questions of our middle school principal, Mr. Gilmore? This is your opportunity. Mr. Sweat.
In business, technology is primarily used to enhance the productivity of employees. How is technology used? What is the cost justification rationale behind technology and computers in education? I'm sure you're not trying to enhance the productivity of students. What exactly why is it critical to your mission?
It's critical because I think we're trying to teach students 21st century skills, of which one of them is the use of technology and the use of technology in the appropriate ways and for learning. And it does. We have a number of programs that we would like students to experience, but we do not have the capacity within many of the computers that we have and the programs that we have to run these.
Could you give us a concrete example?
Sure. We were in here the other day doing a geography program, and they were trying to call up for critical thinking worldview, something from National Geographic. We had no way of doing that. We had 3 or 4 computers that were able to do that and others that were not. We have to bring in a laptop that's over 10 years old so that each student can have at least something to be working with. So in that particular instance, we were not able to bring up that program for the students and for them to be able to use as within the instructional program. So I find that a challenge for us all the time. So I think teachers and most of the programs we have software capabilities for interactive programs with students, and we don't have the places for that to happen. Certainly, everyday math is an example of that. And I would like to make sure that we have the infrastructure, that we have the things that we need for our students to have those kinds of experiences and be able to use the technology in that way for them and for them to participate with it. I think Terry is correct that eventually we're going to have probably the iPhones here or something. We're going to have some other way that kids are going to be able to use and to access technology, but we certainly are not there at this particular time. So I guess my concern is that we have the technology that students can access and staff can access. I think the staff gets frustrated when they go on and they do not have the capability, or it's down, or the network's down, or something else is happening, and their frustration in trying to deliver a lesson to the students as well. Okay, so it's a combination of both things, I think, Jeff, from my perspective.
If I may, Mr. Sweat, I think it is exactly the same as business. It is to increase the productivity of students. Only productivity in education is called achievement. And our students are engaged with technology. And that is the medium in which they live. That is the medium in which they are going to have to be productive citizens. So I would echo Mr. Gilmore's words. It does increase student engagement, which both directly and indirectly increases student achievement.
Any other questions? Thank you very
No,
much.
I have a number, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
If I could, the first question I would have for you is, how does next year's enrollment compare to this year's enrollment? How many do you
Similar.
have? Pardon?
Similar,
Similar to
within 5 or 10 students.
within 5 or 10?
Yes.
My other question would come down to, I noticed custodial services are up significantly when it comes to overtime and substitute, although the actual number for custodial services is down 1,200, you're up 21,000 in these other 2 categories. Could you just give me an idea as to what's happening there? I'm looking at the last, if you look at the last 3 accounts, you'll see what.
So we're looking on page 12 of 17.
We're going to 1217,
the
account middles.
custodial overtime?
Custodians and the overtime are an increase of some 21,000. I'm curious as to why, what happened.
And I believe, I'll let Anna answer that for you.
Yes, about 2 years ago, we started analyzing our overtime. Last year in the budget was simply, what we did is just took whatever allocation and just split it evenly amongst the schools. Last year was the year to collect the data and then examine the expenditures at the end of the year, and then planned for this year. These are more the appropriate amounts. So basically, we took one big pot.
So it was unfunded,
Yes,
it was underfunded before in the budget.
So with the overtime, so you'll see as we move to other schools, some other schools, it came down. And other schools, because the middle school and the high school have the largest number, they each have about 5 to 6 custodians on their crew, as opposed to an elementary school that maybe 3. You know, another one might only have 2. So in other schools, you'll see it go down, and in the larger schools, it goes up. The substitute custodial line, what I am doing is actually in the previous budgets, that has been one account. I'm implementing that same strategy to
Okay.
then
There
be
isn't
able
one of those
to
right now.
plan for
Or
individual
it just goes
schools.
out.
I mean, I hope it helps us to get a better grasp on individual site usage of subs as well as the overtime. So, and you'll see that right through all the schools. This is a whole new account. We took the huge pot, basically,
Right, and broke it up.
and we've done
Right.
that.
So we'll see during the course of the day.
Okay.
My other question would be is, notice that teacher salaries are down some 50,000, but sped is also up 37,000. So I'm wondering, there seems to be since we've only changed 5 students, there's a rebalancing there. Why is the sped up so much?
Special ed,
Special ed, right?
which one are we looking at?
At page 12, the very top account is an increase of 27,000, about 5 items down. There's the paraprofessionals for another 10.
So this middle sped teacher salaries you're asking about?
Yes, that's an increase of
which is up
27,
about
and if you go down 5
27,000.
accounts, you'll see there's also paraprofessionals in there for another 10. So basically, the classroom costs of the special education has gone up by 37 compared to
That-
the overall population dropping 50.
The,
Does that represent the ASD
I
program?
believe that we have the same number of special ed teachers
Yes,
that
we
we
do.
had this year and next year. What this shows is there's a 1.5% collective bargaining agreement increase. Plus, we have some people who have gotten degrees, so they've gone from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, which means it's a lane change, even though in this bargaining session for the contract next year, there is a freeze for steps. People are getting lanes, which means if they got their masters, they go up. So that's why it comes out to a 4%. And they were a younger group, so they've moved up
All
more.
right, so we really haven't changed headcount, but
No,
we
that's
have-
correct.
we
Headcount's
have-
the
all.
same.
But we've changed because of the lanes, which is
But
something we could do.
there is a head count difference, I mean, in the regular teaching account. The reason that is down is that the middle school took the brunt of the budget reduction after town meeting, and I was gonna save this for later, but I'll say it now, where some town officials may have said that there were no layoffs because of the budget that was passed at town meeting. That was incorrect. There were 8 people who were laid off here in the school system, and all 8 of them came out of the middle school.
Okay.
So that's why the decrease. So even though there's a 1.5% increase, just like with the special ed population and people getting master's degrees, so that number would have gone up, but it's gone down because there are fewer people here.
So the number that we're seeing for regular teacher salary would also include lane adjustments, right?
Yes, yes.
Hopefully, my final question has to do with substitute teachers. That number seems to be continuously growing. What are we doing to address that? It's not just, and I'm going to go beyond the junior high school, because I know it seems to be system-wide now. We're paying tremendous amounts of money out in substitutes. And I'm wondering, there has to be a reason, there has to be a cause, and I'd like to know, are we doing something otherwise, so I don't have to ask the question all day long?
Substitutes are, we can categorize them into different pots. And here, under substitutes, you're seeing all the substitutes. But when you have a fairly young staff, and in the education field, better than 50% are of the female gender. We have people within that have children and maternity leave. And so where you may not have that as the percentage as education does, that is something. I mean, you know, somebody's out for 8 weeks, it's 40 days of substitute time. On the other hand, we have people who may be a little bit older and go out for, you know, a number of years ago, we had somebody out for cancer for about 1.5 years. As well as, so that's one category of subs. We also have people work with students, and students sneeze and blow the nose and come in with germs on their hands and touch everything, and so the staff does come down with things, which is another issue. And we have training going on, more training than we've ever had because of RTI. For instance, on one of our half days, we have a full day of RTI training for 25 teachers. Well, we get subs for those 25 teachers so they can be in training on that half day. So that goes into the sub account as well. So it's professional development, it's long-term illnesses and maternity leave. Every one of our administrators, and I'm saying with two of them sitting here, if they felt that there is a pattern of abuse, then we address that to the full extent that we can under the law.
The first two groups that you described, I would think historically would tend to be pretty similar. Okay, I know we've had some enrollment drops, and then we've had some layoffs, et cetera, so I would say maybe we might even see a small improvement there. I don't know, it could go either way. That leaves me coming down to the last section, which basically says, it sounds to me that the RTI has had an impact on the whole issue of substitute teaching. Would that be a fair evaluation?
RTI and other training, because it's not the only training that's gone on. So, yes, all of our trainings has an impact on that budget. And it continues, the RTI is continuing next year for grades 7 and 8, as well as some of the coaching that will go on that requires some substitute.
I'm not blaming it all on RTI, it's just that we're putting emphasis, and we want to put increased emphasis on it. And this is an area that, if that's what we're going to do, then we would expect continued increases
But I would
in
also,
substitute numbers.
I would also say that we were very, very careful about minimizing that. So we scheduled the trainings during the in-service days so that we wouldn't need subs, and during the early release days to minimize the impact on subs. But clearly, when you have 25 or 28 people going to training, there's going to be some impact on the substitutes. But we have it about as minimal as we can possibly have it and still get the training in.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Swett.
Two things. I'd like to draw everybody's attention to the middle school salary regular line, which is about the 8th line down on page 11 where the middle school starts. You can see that in 2011, the spending was about $2.6 million. In the year in which we are currently operating, it's $2.3 million, and it goes down from there. So you can see the impact of the layoffs on Howard's regular salaries. But back to your point about substitutes. I share your concern about the growth of substitutes, and I have had that concern for a number of years. As a result of that, just recently a study was completed of all the time off days of regular teachers for which substitutes might be used. And that obviously includes sick, but it also includes personal, it includes professional, it includes school training, all those things. As a result of that study, there is still some aspect of this number, which is when you roll it all up, comes close to $500,000 a year. I'm saying system-wide. That I remain uncomfortable with, and continued scrutiny is going on to satisfy yours truly. So I share your concern.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you.
And now stepping from the on-deck circle into at-bat.
He's athletic.
I knew that you would. Our high school principal, Mr. Palladino, and Mr. Palladino, I'm sure you will introduce who's with you.
Yes, today we have my athletic director for the Wareham High School, Mr. Mark LaRanger is here, and obviously when we get to the 3 athletic line items, he'll be able to answer any questions you may have on those athletic line items. So I guess we'll get started here.
We're going to get started. I'm just grabbing for Mr. Paul,
Sure.
who missed his opportunity of getting, so Mr. Paulson, if you would pass that down, Mr. Paulson, we'll have a 17-page budget as well.
Thank you very much. Your generosity is much appreciated.
You're welcome. And okay.
I had the same problem last year. So we'll get right into the nuts and bolts, into the budget. And so if we can just, I tried
You
to.
don't want to spend any time looking at the pretty picture?
Okay, I tried to spread this out a little bit so you could see it. Hopefully it works for the folks in the back. But I'll stick to the accounts that went up or down more than 10%. Happy to report that we have completed our NEAS reaccreditation process. We're still waiting for some final reports, but we're done with the physical process where the folks, we had 16 folks that came down from various schools throughout New England and were a part of our reaccreditation process with their site visit. So you can see that that account that constitutes conferences, graduations, and memberships went down almost 60%, and the large portion of that was to cover the site visit and the requirements for the site visit and the self-study as well for the previous year. So you can see that went back down to reality. Our textbook account, like Mr. Gilmore said before me, we have students that do not have textbooks in classes. We have what we call classroom sets in classes, which means the books don't leave the classroom. We have kids that share books. Our textbook account has been devastated over the years, and we're trying to bring that back up so we can purchase this year math books. There's a lot of pressure on us with our math scores, and it doesn't help that we can't have kids bring home math books. It's a tremendous resource, obviously. They're taking worksheets home with minimal instructions, and the textbook gives them the guided instructions.
And just when you get to your justification, you'll see that I added that number, that $20,000 on the textbooks, does not include any money really for math books. Because if you went out to buy algebra books for every freshman at the high school, we're talking about $100,000. So that $20,000 is replacement costs only. So I don't want people to think that that's all. And and I understand you were trying to be modest and not have it go up too much. But
trying to make it realistic. We know the times that we're in. Last year, our teachers union negotiated, as part of the negotiations, a new schedule for the high school. In doing that, basically all the teachers agreed to teach one more class, which was great on their behalf. But as you increase the number of classes, you also have to increase the number of instructional supplies. So we did go up marginally there, not even enough to cover the added classes, but hopefully enough to Band-Aid it together. Last year, my pencil and paper account, which basically is the paper for the school, was cut. We were able to kind of get creative with Anna. We did some good work there, being creative to absorb the cut, but we do not have enough paper as it is to get through this year, so we're going to need that money put back in the account. The instructional other is the same idea. These are the elective courses that we added. Again, every teacher added a course to their schedule. Counselor supply, everything else kind of stayed the same on my first sheet, and I'll just continue on. The next increase is equipment contracted, and certainly that the price did go up there, and I'll have Anna speak to that if there's any questions at the end on that. Equipment repair, 4%. I'll stay away from that. Technical supplies. Part of our NEAS sightings, the biggest sighting they had, because they gave me a preliminary oral report when they met with me, their biggest concern was our lack of technology and the age of our technology. In the past, we have taken technology and repositioned it. We haven't replaced it. I know Howard gave you a number of 8 years of age is the average age of his technology. Ours is about 8.5. So there's an increase there of about $8,000 to try and get one of our computer labs up to speed, and it's going to cost us close to $20,000 to do that. The last, the copier lease, rather, was another line item that did go down. We're happy to report that, and that was some creative negotiations on Anna's part to bring that down. And that's pretty much it for plus or minus 10%. I'd like to just turn to the next slide, which gives you a justification.
All right, athletic expenditures was
Athletic expenditures was 6.83. I know Mark has broken it down, and maybe you can just kind of touch upon the increased costs we've incurred over the last few years with athletics.
The last 3 years, every ref, every season has a dollar increase, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but for instance, a sport like football where there's 52 refs times 3 is $156. Boys and girls soccer is 72 refs times 3 is $216. So those little costs add up, and it hasn't. We haven't had any adjustments to cover those. The total of refs for the fall increase is $612. For the winter was $495, and for the spring is $595. On top of that, our transportation costs have gone up significantly. Average about 50 cents or so per trip. And it's again
Per hour.
per hour per
Right.
trip. Yeah. So again, football, cheerleading, 30 buses, $90. Boys and girls soccer, 22 buses, $66, so on and so forth. Our other high-end expenses that have gone up, our trainer has gone up $988 in the past 3 years. Ice time for hockey has gone up about $10 an hour. I averaged it at about 50 hours, which is about $500 increase the last 3 years. And fees, MIA fees, and our conference fees and things like that, right around $200 of increase, for a total of $4,161. And that's to stay, even. That's to stay.
Right.
That's to stay, be able to pay our bills and to stay even and on task.
And as we talked about, I'll just kind of refresh here. The textbook account, we're looking for an additional $4,000 to purchase some new books. There is a new math requirement for our students with the Mass Core. We are now required to have a 4th year of math for our students, where before there was only a small group of kids based on their MCAS scores that did need to.
see what I added.
Yes. Instructional supplies, as I mentioned, we did have the schedule change, which the great thing is we have classes that we can offer our students that we didn't offer before, and the class size is actually reasonable. But we do need some more money for supplies to make sure those classes have what they need to be successful. As I talked about with the paper that was cut last year to make budget, I can't absorb that this year. The closet is empty. Instructional other, these are the elective courses. Again, same thing. We're offering more courses. I offer another wood shop class, I need more wood. I offer another plastics class, I need more plastic. Okay, I offer another art class, I need more paint. I offer another ceramics, etc. And it goes on and on. The tech supplies, we're going to be cited, okay, and we may be placed on warning, and I need to be proactive. Our technology is not there. NEASC is our accrediting institute that allows our kids to apply to college and to gain entrance. And without the technology and without these kids, I know Howard mentioned 21st century learning. These are the type of students they're competing with, the kids that are computer savvy, that have this in their classroom. Okay, I've got labs that I can't bring classes to because we don't have enough computers. It's sad, but we try and get by. And the frustration on the teacher's part, they create this awesome lesson. They're going down to the computer lab to implement it, and half the computers aren't working because they're 8, 9, 10 years old. And again, these are the kids that we're going to be going off into college, and we want them to have those skills to be successful. We want them to be able to compete with neighboring towns, and we can't right now. So hopefully this will be a step in the right direction. There are 3 additional requests, and this is to cover some things that are required. I mentioned the math teacher, the Mass Core rather. We're going to need a math teacher to cover that 4th year in math. And currently the requirement is 3 years of math. So there are 60 some odd kids that are seniors right now not taking a math, and those kids are going to need a math for next year. We have an inclusion class. These are for students that have IEPs. There are a large number of students in inclusion classes. In the past, we were lucky enough to have teacher assistants. Those were cut. And so the teachers are getting frustrated because there's a lot of kids, their needs are not being met. And it makes it it makes the education process flow when you have some additional hands in a class that's kind of needy and has some students that could use some extra help, remediation, things of that nature. A few years ago, we lost a full-time secretary. As I'm sure Terry can address, DESE is requiring more and more paperwork from my secretaries, more and more documentation, and it's just, they're here till 4 or 5 at night and they're burning themselves out, and even then, the things aren't getting done. We really are in a need for another clerical person, and we're asking for a part-time secretary to make up for that cut 3 years ago. And that is the end of my report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
We're on page 13 of 17, begins the high school list of accounts. And if you go over to page 15 of 17, you see the bottom line. Last year, the high school operation cost $6,320,372. And he is requesting a total of about a 5% increase, but a lot of that are on things that are not in his control, but we will answer any questions that you have. Mr.
Yes.
Paulson.
I have 3 questions, and they're really kind of not related to one another. One you didn't touch on, I noticed the heating bill is up substantially.
Mr. Paulson, can you grab under that microphone again?
You're being televised, so.
They've got your good side.
They got my good side? Excellent. That's why I'm sitting here. I noticed that the heating bill, actually it says high heating. How appropriate. Is up $23,000 in an era where fuel costs are generally going down, not up. So that's my first question as to why that's up so substantially.
I think when you look at our school compared to other schools of the same footprint, I think you'll see the 103 is probably pretty low. I think the 80 was not as accurate as it should have been, and I believe the...
It was an underfunded account last year. If you look at our
So
heating
Anna
use,
looked at the actuals,
For
and
the
the actual
actuals
was
and-
above what we had it budgeted.
I would...
especially since it's a tight budget, we want to make sure we absolutely have the commitment to the contracts that we have to pay.
But again, I would encourage you to peruse through the other schools, and I think you'll find for our square footage and our occupied time, we're basically open from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then some on the weekends. I think when you look at that and compare it, I think you'll see the 103,000 is modest.
Scott, I'm not gonna ask you to pull it off the top of your head, but if you looked at the BTUs that were expended over the last couple of years, are you in, basically at the same point, or are you seeing a greater increase?
Our therm usage is actually down. I could get you some numbers specifically. I'm not going to I don't have them in the back of my head, but I know our custodians do an excellent job about making sure that we get that building up to a certain temperature and then the heat gets shut off. They're creative. They keep the pumps going to get that residual effect of the heat. Sometimes I have to tell them, you probably should have kept that on for a little longer. But they do a great job, and again, I encourage you to look at the other schools, and I think you'll see for the largest building, open the most number of hours with the largest group of kids, I think $103,000 is very modest.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank
Now my
you.
second question,
Sure.
and getting back to something that Barry touched on the textbooks. If I understood it correctly, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, that were we to get new textbooks just for algebra, it would cost roughly $100,000.
$100,000, that's correct.
So to expand on that for just a moment, if we could, if we were to get new or newer textbooks for all subjects, including algebra, what might it cost?
Jan can probably give you
Jan's right across from you.
Is that a softball or?
No, that's okay, because I have been lobbying with the superintendent. We're facing a major issue that you'll hear more about this afternoon, in that the national standards have been adopted by Massachusetts as well as 48 other states, and that has changed our curriculum frameworks, which changes what we have to teach. The greatest impact is high school mathematics. So your question is quite insightful, Mr. Paulson, because if we do what we need to do, we need to purchase new math books for all math courses at the high school. The rigor and the intensity of mathematics, it has been raised by quantum leaps to bring us aligned with international standards in science and math. And what we're looking at is a minimum cost of about $100,000 per math course. So that would include Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Trigonometry, Statistics, and Calculus as minimal. Now, not all students would take calculus, so that might be a little bit less, and not all students would take statistics. There'd be sort of a trade-off there. Obviously, when we go into quantity of purchases, the prices also go down. And one of the things that we have been negotiating, and that quite frankly I'm quite proud of in the district, although it's a double-edged sword, is that when we purchase textbooks, we are able to negotiate free interactive online support with those textbooks, which is great for the students from home, but doesn't currently work great in the schools. So the number of actual hard copy textbooks that we would purchase versus the number of online licenses would also affect that price, because you can do a trade-off and it's a little bit cheaper to get the online license. But you're roughly talking $500,000.
For all subjects, including social studies?
Oh, no, sir, just for mathematics.
Well, that's my question.
You want every?
Yes.
All right. History.
Just if you have a ballpark number.
If I have a ballpark number, in English language arts, the increase is in informational text, moving to a balanced literacy approach, so we need to purchase or have online access. I would say you're talking in the neighborhood of $1 million.
For everything.
For everything.
Okay, that's
roughly.
Okay, that's from my standpoint, that's fine. I
Okay.
didn't mean to take everybody's time up.
Fine, is it okay to put in the budget?
Well, it may not be okay to put in the budget, but I'm curious, as I think we all are, as to what the cost would be to do this.
Or we could go with tablets and download them.
And you suggested that we might be cited.
We will be cited.
Cited sounds like a bad thing to have happen, and I guess it is. What are the what levels are there different levels of citation? And
right.
What are the consequences?
If we are on warning, we'll have to have a plan as far as moving forward, how to get out of the warning status. Ultimate consequence could be we lose accreditation, but we'd be placed on warning. Is kind of where we're just on the edge, one way or the other. We're either going to be just on warning or we're just above warning. But we'll know probably in just a few weeks.
So if you're put on warning, if the school system is put on warning, is it then 1, 2, 3 years to remediate it?
I believe it's 2 years, a 2-year plan to have it, and they want an action plan before the end of the school year as far as what your plan is to remediate the problem.
And one final, I apologize.
Sure.
A fourth question, and I've talked to Barry about this in the past to some extent, and that is that we spend a lot of money on special ed. It's mandated. It's the right thing to do, and I have no objection to that. Where I do have an observation, though, is that I've always wondered how the money gets split up. Is it a bell curve? In other words, we spend 20% here for special ed, and over here we spend 20% for our very best students. Or is it skewed in some way? And that's really what
I believe it's based on need, but I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Lazan because he's got the best pulse on that.
I don't know if there's an easy answer for that, but you know what I'm driving
Well,
at.
if you don't know there's an easy answer, I don't know there's an easy answer. There isn't an easy answer when you're looking at a comparative between enrichment programs, for example, and special education programs, primarily because one is an entitlement and required by federal and state law, and the other is not. I think you're going to hear as we go along that there have been a number of things put in place this year to do more for our children who really need some of the enrichment and challenge activities. But the proportionate share of special education across the nation, really not just across the state, typically is 20 to 25% of the school budget. And the control factor in it is how much of that money can you spend within the district to provide programming in the district where you have control over hiring, over the quality of the programs and so forth.
And at the other end of the spectrum?
At the end, for advanced, I don't have a percentage.
I believe one thing we can talk about that is an enhancement that we really haven't had is that with the implementation of our RTI structure, during one period a day, what we call an intervention block, our teachers are, instead of heterogeneously grouping the children, we have all abilities, they are homogeneously grouping children so that we can give a third tier of instruction to children that need it, predominantly by our special ed teachers. We have a tier 2 kind of in the middle by some of our teachers, and then we have a challenged group, the group that has already mastered the material and now can be challenged to move beyond and deeper into the curriculum, which is something that is now happening. So that is one way we are helping to take care of our what we would call gifted and talented population.
We
Jan,
have
I think,
additional
has another.
programs for gifted and talented and highly motivated students. Dr. Rabinovich is absolutely right. The RTI has lent a structure to enrichment programs. However, we have been offering programs to students in the elementary schools through Great Books, which is an accelerated literature program. At the middle school, at high school, and at Minden Elementary, we have Destination Imagination, which is an innovation, research, and design program that is part of a competition, largely and predominantly handled by teams with lots of parent volunteers as well as our teachers who coordinate it, mostly after school time. Our global education has expanded. We have all of our math teachers at the middle school trained in pre-AP math in the first year of training, and that will be continuing, and we will be adding pre-AP science training for our teachers to expand those enrichments in the middle school. At the high school, we have AP for our most accelerated students. To put a percentage on it, which I know is what you're asking.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
I'd have to go through and sort of tweak it out of the budget. Is it the same as what we are spending on special education? I couldn't tell you, quite honestly, because one's an entitlement program and one is blended in with regular education.
The other thing I would just add to that, Dick, is that we're really good at what we're looking at is apportioning existing funds. So one of another example, and I think it's a great question to ask the two elementary principals when they come in terms of how they're scheduling to allow for some of the challenge activities. But also, this year is the first year that I've required that special education teachers provide some regular education services through the RTI program. That's apportioning a very heavy piece of the budget into regular education, which in turn allows for the opportunity for the regular teachers to be able to do some of those challenge activities during the intervention blocks.
Okay. Well, thank you.
One answer I would offer you is I was surprised to learn at a school council meeting at one of our elementary schools that when they started talking about enrichment activities, it appeared that most of the enrichment activities at this elementary school were the result of parent volunteers through the PTA.
Any other comments before we move on?
Just a question.
Sure.
You mentioned that your computers are 8.5 years old as an average. What kind of an operating system are they using?
What do we use? Is it Microsoft?
They're Windows.
Is it XP? Is it previous?
Most of them are XP. Just about all of them. Some are still 2003.
Would I be correct in saying that it's anticipated that next year Windows will probably stop supporting XP?
Windows has actually already stopped supporting XP, and we are working on moving to Windows 7.
Thank you.
How do you get online here?
Of course, we are in 2012 in a few days.
Well, from my point, is I have XP at home. My wife had one that had the next generation.
Excuse me, could you speak up a little bit? 'Cause
I
we
have
can't
XP
quite
at
hear.
home, and for most of my documents in Excel or Word, I'm using a compatible system of office
Yep.
management. But some of my friends in the Finance Committee are already eons beyond that, and I have to bring in, it'll run a conversion program, but I'm really hampered sometimes when I'm trying to take documents from one system to another system, and I'm sure that they're struggling with some of those issues of an antique like what I'm using. It would seem to me almost impossible to think that what you would do in the middle school would integrate into the high school as a continuous flow if, when they get up to high school,
Yep.
you're working with some extremely old systems. You have a major problem of trying to integrate your middle schools and your high schools from my perspective. Is that
I would agree to a certain extent, although what the middle school has is not very far off. They're almost in the same situation as the high school. The building itself is newer. Some of the technology is newer, but Dr. Rabinovich, how long ago was the middle school rebuilt?
Yeah, 2005 is when the building was completed.
So over half of the computers in the middle school were purchased from 2003 through 2005.
2003, 2004.
But we are having that same situation, purchasing Office 2007, we should be purchasing 2010, some are still using 2003, and the files don't always convert so nicely, but.
And that's a frustrating piece, is we have spent a lot of money over the years on different programs, and we're bringing in new technology that we kind of have to move back down to make it compatible, so it is a frustrating process.
As one of the goals on Terry's technology slide, it talked about the ability, building capacity for the traffic, the idea for how many users are on and what they're using, so that if we can get into a cloud situation where everybody could go and access whichever program we bought for the cloud, hopefully 2011 Office, and then everybody would have access to that, instead of downloading the program on every single machine separately, particularly as we get more users and more devices. You know, our technical staff of 3 people can't keep up running from building to building to do it. So you need a location, but there are steps that we have to go through to get there, and it's going to take us a while, unfortunately. It isn't turn a switch and spend the money and get it done. It's not just the money, it's also finding out what has to be done. I mean, we can't move ahead with these until we figure out the wireless part, and the wireless can't work unless we have the capacity built. So, you know, you have to build the foundation before you build the house. And so, I don't know about anybody else, but as Dick asked the question and they said, whatever it was, $2 million for the textbooks. Well, why not get everybody one of these? We'll download them on here. Great, except if we did that, none of them would work. And then what would we look like? So we have to make sure that infrastructure is in place, that it is workable, and we need to scale it up. And then, when we get to that point, then we'll become into capital planning to have a capital plan to replace, because that's what this is. At one point, we talked about probably $200,000 a year for 5 years to replace everything in the system. It's down now because the price of these things have come down. So you saw in her slide, it's $150,000. But, you know, that's competing for other capital needs at this particular moment. So we're not there asking for it this time. I would like to propose a 5-minute recess. so the high school can move on and we can bring in
I do
minor
have one quick
forest.
question before you break though.
Yes,
The
two more
change, the
questions.
change in enrollment and the change in full-time equivalents for instructional personnel.
Right. The change in enrollment is maybe plus 3 to 4% is what we're anticipating. We have a fairly small senior class, and we're anticipating a rather large freshman class. So
So how much is 3 to 4?
I believe we're looking at about 40 to 50 more kids next
Okay.
year.
My other question was the full-time equivalent from the instructional staff. Are you adding
Have we added anything?
in,
No.
your, in your budget?
No.
Yes.
Just the one math
Just
person. I'm
one?
sorry. Yes, the one math.
So you're plus 1 full-time equivalent. Okay, well,
All right. Thank you.
Was there a halftime, I thought you mentioned.
There was a halftime secretary, and I was looking for
I
two.
did not add it to the budget.
You did not? Okay. Mike, I have 2 questions.
I'm their filter. Otherwise, it would be 15% more we'd be asking for.
I have 2 questions. One is, on the high school substitute teacher nursing salary line, I don't want to dwell on this, we've already talked about it. My question is, when it went from 93,000 for this year to 109,000 for next year, did you personally budget that line item?
Basically, my understanding is no. I believe Anna did it, and it was underfunded, and so she adjusted it so it would be a
But
match.
you didn't come up with your needs
No,
for that line?
No.
So you really, and how is a substitute in the high school? If a substitute is paid,
Right.
how does it happen in the high school? What causes that to occur?
There'd have to be someone out that they would be replacing.
Is it something that only you have the authority to do, or who has the authority to actually call in a sub?
I have a dean that deals with the subs, but I have to sign off on them every day.
After the fact or before the fact?
During the fact.
Okay. When you say dean, one of your 4 deans?
One of their
That's one of their responsibilities?
Right. Right. They all have
That's
one.
interesting.
They all
I
have
never
one.
knew that.
They all have one responsibility outside of their teaching and discipline.
Oh, so it's not 4 deans that have all, one of them, one
Right.
of the 4 deans has the responsibility for subs in the entire building?
Right. And so one does all the subs, one deals with attendance with the courts. They all have a job outside.
Got it. I think I understood it correctly. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So you don't budget this line item, so I won't question you on it.
And I believe our attendance rate was 96-point-something%. So our teachers are on the job doing the job, unless there's, as Dr. Binovich mentioned.
That is in fact the curiosity behind this number.
Right.
I actually don't have a problem with the attendance of your staff.
All right.
I have a problem with the use of subs. So it's a somewhat of an anomaly that we're dealing with, that we can't figure out why the subs are being used, but I don't want
Right,
to dwell on it.
and I do want to mention, if I can, we did away with study halls this past year. So before, where you could herd 3 or 4 classes into the cafeteria and have one sub, we have no study halls. So every period there is instruction going on. Obviously, as a principal, I want the teacher there as often as possible. But as Dr. Binovich mentioned, we have young staff. There's a few people have had some major illnesses. Knock on wood, everyone's back and healthy, but you never know.
I almost have to apologize for asking the following question, but I have to, just because we're in times like this. Once again, in business, if you're struggling to create a surplus or a profit, depending on the type of business you're in, you sometimes go back to your core competencies. Now, the state, of course, defines the core, if you will, and then you add to that core, because I know you and I and many others believe in a diversified experience for a student for a variety of reasons.
Right.
One of your core competencies outside of the defined core, for example, would be DECA, which is not only a classroom program, but it's an extracurricular program. And there's been fabulous success at both the state and, in some cases, the national level. If you had to go back to your defined core competency, that's with a small c, okay, meaning you get to define what you really do well and where you really add value, and delete programs that you don't really feel good about you don't need to say what they are, okay? And they're not all that, they're not chosen as much by other students, et cetera. How many programs do you think you could delete, and how many FTEs would that impact? Obviously, what I'm getting at is if you had to retrench
Right.
back to some level to save dollars, what would be the impact on FTEs and programs?
Well, anytime, maybe I could step back a little bit. I mean, our students dictate what programs run. Okay, the students select their courses. Obviously, we have requirements that are required. So to answer your question, the students drive what classes are offered and what classes aren't.
Whoa. I've heard a student complain publicly that they didn't have a program because they wanted it, and you said you couldn't offer it. So they don't drive it completely.
Well, let me finish. So we take their courses they select, okay? And if we only have 3 or 4 kids that sign up for that class, and I know what the class was, okay, it's very tough when I'm in front of the school committee to run courses and say, well, we had 4 kids in this advanced placement course, and then I've got certain school committee members saying, well, your average class size is this. We try and make it so it's manageable. Obviously, our goal is to try and keep the class size down, but also to run the classes that the students would like to see. There are certain classes that 2 or 3 kids would love to see, but I can't rationalize that. I can't go in front of Dr. Rabinovich and say I'm running a class with 3. I want a minimum of 13, 14 kids to run a course, and even then I'm scratching my head. Is this realistic? So to answer your questions, I don't see a course or a teacher that I could cut because we have X number of teachers in each department. Department heads get involved. Here are what we need. These are the basic core classes that we need, and in each department it's different based on local and state requirements. And then we look at, as you talked about, that well-rounded education. How can we offer these electives? At this point in time, based on requirements, local and state, student interest, I don't see a class that obviously there might be one class here and there, but it wouldn't constitute an FTE.
So what if the school committee said to Dr. Rabinovich, we can't afford to run a class that doesn't have 25 kids in it? How many programs would you be eliminating?
I'm just guessing here. I'd probably be eliminating probably 12 different.
12
yeah,
electives.
Yeah.
And how many FTEs would you be able to save if you did that?
I guess that would be 1.5.
You'd eliminate a dozen or so programs, but only eliminate 1.5 FTEs.
I'd eliminate if it was.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It would be it'd be 3. I'm sorry, 3 teachers. It would be.
So you'd eliminate a dozen or so experiences for students.
Right.
And you'd eliminate 3 FTEs.
3 FTEs.
But radically alter the curriculum that you
the average class size would probably be in the high 20s at that point in time.
So those 3 FTEs before benefits would be maybe 150,000, something like that.
I would defer to have a longer conversation about this at another time because I've got 2 principals who are on the on-deck circle.
Okay.
And I think Scott is reaching, and I don't necessarily agree with the mathematics.
Then I'll defer. Then I'm happy to defer, but I would like a good answer to that question, not because I like the idea, but because it may become a requirement. That's all.
And when we come before, maybe on the one of the next budget thing,
Fine.
I have everybody.
Thank you.
I'll ask Scott to think about that answer a little bit.
I'd like to go to the other end of the spectrum and back to the 3 to 4, because those 3 or 4 students obviously have interest in the subject. Clearly, how many different requests do you get for classes where you would have 3 or 4? I'm trying to put it in my mind
I'd say
what it would cost us.
There's probably about 5 or 6 requests for
That would have 3 or 4.
where there's 3 or 4 kids. Sometimes it's like an advanced business, and most of the time it's AP courses.
So if just to answer it more fully, is it possible that those 3 or 4 children that may want to take Spanish 5 and we don't have an instructor could take it on the online course?
We're hoping with a different vendor that might be an opportunity. Right now, with the vendor we're using, it's not.
All right, but, so that is one way that can be handled is by online learning. We currently have one vendor, and we'll have to explore that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'd like to call a 5-minute break, have our elementary principals come on down and sit at the table and set up, and we'll be ready to go. Restrooms straight out the door, and before you go down the stairs, there's a gentleman's and a ladies' room. Take some refreshments, please. We have provided some coffee and. And maybe we should have begin.
You're all set.
Thank you very much. Welcome back to our annual budget presentation for the Finance Committee. And we are now going to pick up talking about the Minot Forest Elementary School. We have our principal from Minot Forest, Mrs. Joan Siemens, with us today. And if you are looking on the 17-page document, Minot Forest, I believe, is page 4, I'm told. So if you go to page 4, you will see the beginning of Minot Forest accounts, and it all goes down, and I'm sure Joan doesn't like to think about it this way, but last year, to run her program at Minot Forest was a $3,604,212, and she has asked for some increases, and we're about to get started. So, welcome, Joan.
Great, thank you.
Quick question, does this reflect the reorganization that was presented at the last school committee meeting?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Maybe you want to just elucidate what that means for the people who weren't there.
And actually, it's in line what we did last year. I'm presenting the budget for Minot Forest and the Ethel E. Hammond School, and Mr. Lozan will be presenting the budget for the East Wareham School. He did that last year because most of the school funding comes from special education monies and grants. So that is continuing this year as well. At the last school committee meeting, we had a proposal that was accepted where the early childhood coordinator is now going to be the person in charge of running the building, and that will take effect as of July. So I'm going to finish out this year as the principal of East Wareham School, but then the early childhood coordinator, who's already in that position, already in that building, will oversee the duties for the East Wareham preschool program. So if you look at the account numbers at Minot Forest, and again, just going over the differences, plus or minus 10%, you'll see under contracted services, due to the a telephone lease we no longer have at Minot Forest and some of the other contracts that have come down, there was a savings there of $5,011. So I was able to use that money into other accounts that you'll see up above. So for instance, for text and instructional supplies, I've added $5,000 into that particular account. You'll see from FY11, that account was cut due to budget cuts that the superintendent had to make over the years. But I also have an enrollment issue at grade 2 this year. I have 125 children in 6 classrooms. I have 5 classrooms for grade 3. So when those 125 children go to grade 3 next year, I need to transfer a position from grade 2 to grade 3 so that class size won't be too high. So therefore, I'm going to need to purchase additional materials for grade 3. So that is why I've added the $5,000 into that particular line item. The $938 you see added to principal's other is really a housekeeping issue, and I explain this on the next slide, but it's to allow for the assistant principal to have his membership under the Mass Elementary Association for School Principals. And the last particular line item, the copier and the Rizzo, whenever you have a new machine, there's always maintenance agreements, and sometimes they go up and down. So this is a savings of $927, and that's how I added it to the principal's other line account. So you'll see the bottom line, actually didn't come out in the slide, but the bottom line stays the same from last year of $146,000 for these particular accounts.
And these are the accounts that Joan has discretion over, versus when you look at the 17-page document, there are a number of those, such as custodian and heating and that enter budgets according to what is needed, what was spent, and the analysis thereof. So these are the accounts that Joan has control over.
And even though I added 5,000 to the textbook account, you'll see in my next slide a request for literacy materials, so I kept that money separate. So for the textbook account, as I mentioned, I need to purchase additional materials for a grade 3 classroom due to the enrollment. I mentioned the principal's other account from the Mass Elementary School Principals Association for the assistant principal. Also, I am a certified instructor in the district for nonviolent crisis prevention, which trains our teachers for restraint training and verbal interventions with some of our population. And I'm required to update my certification every 4 years. And sometimes that takes a workshop, sometimes it just takes an online exam. So I've added some money into that out of the 938 to help cover that training. And again, those increases that I've had will come from the decrease in the contracted services account. I'm asking for approximately $42,000 for 2 additional part-time interventionists. At the elementary school, we are rolling out response to intervention. Not sure if you've had a chance to hear about that yet, but it's a framework that we have been building upon. We had our grade 3 teachers trained during the summer, as well as the instructional leaders and the administrators. They are now implementing the RTI process. We just completed training for grades 2 and 4 teachers. They will start implementing that process in January. We now are going to be training our kindergarten and first grade teachers in January. They will be implementing that process in September. And then finally, we have our grade 5 and 6 teachers that will be training by the end of the summer. They will be implementing that RTI process in September as well. So because we're expanding this process now, we need to add the interventionists that will help to go into the classrooms to provide tiered instruction for our students. We do various assessments for our children. We see what levels that they're at, and we provide instruction to where they need it. All the children get their core instruction from the classroom teacher, and then we break them up into groups. So we have a group that we call Tier 2 that need extra support. We have a group that's called Tier 3, and they need even more interventions. We also have a group that need to be challenged, and we're providing those services during our intervention time, which happens throughout the day. So we have 2 part-time interventionists right now. We have 2 instructional leaders that have part of their day that are helping with interventions, and we have 1 reading specialist that's providing interventions. In order to increase the RTI process, we need to add the interventions. So the $42,000 is requesting for 2 more part-time interventionists. That is also going to help with a request I have regarding instructional leaders that I'll get to in just a minute. The next request I have is for $40,000 to provide after-school tutoring for students in grades K to 5. These students are at risk in their reading area, and we're focusing on reading currently. Through the Title I grant, we provide tutoring to students who qualify for low income. It's called Supplemental Educational Services, and that's tutoring that's provided after school, some of it by Wareham teachers, some of it by outside vendors. But we have a group of students who also need to have this tutoring who don't qualify because of low income. I'm proud that at Minot Forest we made AYP in our ELA this year, but some of the categories that we made AYP in, we did it under what they call a safe harbor. We were able to improve the proficiency and really work with those at-risk populations. So this is a need that we see for our students to provide some extra tutoring to help them with their reading skills. With the new Common Core standards that the national standards we're following, 50% of the instruction we have to use will be with informational text. We know as a district and as an elementary population that we need to purchase additional materials to align ourselves with the Common Core standards. So we will be working with the Director of Curriculum Instruction and know that we need to purchase additional materials. What we currently have is Houghton Mifflin. It's our basal reader. We're using that right now, but that doesn't provide us with enough informational text that we are going to use for the Common Core standards. So Mrs. Panarisi and I will work with Mrs. Rotella and our ELA Literacy Committee to look at what we need to do to purchase. So we put approximately $60,000 as a request to purchase those materials that will be needed. And the instructional leaders. I currently have 2 full-time instructional leaders. As I just mentioned, part of the day is going into classrooms and helping with interventions. The other part of their day, they're doing the assessments of students, they're collecting the data, they're sharing the data with classroom teachers, they're doing observations of teachers and writing up the reports, they're doing walkthroughs. We call themselves the SWAT team, the School-Wide Assessment Team. So they go in, they do these quick assessments, and they get all the data, and it's really been great this year that they can go to a grade level team meeting and they can share all this with the teachers. And from that data, we form our groups for RTI. What students need Tier 2 intervention, what students need Tier 3. However, what they're doing right now is really more than a part-time job. They really need to be focusing full-time on the assessments, the data, the analyzing, the observations, the walkthroughs. When we do walkthroughs, we're providing direct feedback to teachers, and that's used in the evaluation process. So by increasing them to full-time, it's going to give them more time to do what they need to do. Right now, they're staying pretty late, and I'm very appreciative of what they're doing, but it's going beyond their school hours to try to get all the data in place that we need. So you'll see as we get to the line items, the full budget that you have, that's why there's an increase for that. The Hammond basically follows right under Minot Forest. The only major increase they had in their particular accounts was the copy and Rizzo. We had purchased a new copier, and now we have to add a maintenance agreement to that, so that's why that particular account had gone up. And the same with Hammond as with Minot Forest. By increasing instructional leaders and the interventionists, we need to bring those supports to Hammond as well, as they currently do not have any of these services for kindergarten. So that's another reason why we have to have that increase. So that ends the particular accounts that went up or down by 10%.
And, well, now I think it's questions. We'll go into questions and answers.
The other part I want to mention, 2 weeks ago, we had a visit from the Mass School Building Authority. We had 2 gentlemen that came down to visit along with Senator Pacheco. Minot Forest has submitted an application for an expansion project renovation. We'd like to build another wing onto the building. We know we have a lot of issues with maintenance issues and electrical issues. There's a whole list. It's like 4 pages of areas of priorities that we feel that Minot Forest needs. That has been submitted to the state. They did come down and they visited us. They understand the need for what we're asking for. They see that we're using every nook and cranny in the building for instruction, for storage, and we're just waiting to hear from that application. So if that is approved, then maybe some of these areas that we can't address in the current budget could be addressed through that process.
And as a first step to the statement of interest that we have sent in, the district is undergoing something called building a master plan. So it's a facilities/space needs study that we will be hiring an architect to come in, look at all of our building stock, look at how we're using all of the space, and then come up with a report and recommendations about how that is being used. That's one of the things that the Mass School Building Authority looks at. They want to make sure that you're using your current stock appropriately and that, you know, you need the space that you're asking for. So that's a first step. That's not the feasibility study that I'm talking about. This is something that we will fund internally to have done so that we'll have better data to support the statement of interest that we have submitted, both for the Minot Forest and Deacon's, which would come after the Minot Forest building, because you have to give them a focus of one at a time. But one of the things in the previous picture, the Hammond, where we have our kindergarten children, is a wooden 100-year-old structure, not handicapped accessible. And this summer, I had to spend in excess of $25,000 to encapsulate and remove lead paint because of the age of the children that are using the building. That doesn't touch the outside of the building, which would be much more expensive. So by doing the Minot Forest renovation and expansion, the hope is to take the kindergartens out of this school, move them into Minot Forest. And, unfortunately, we're, even getting approval, there are many steps that we have to go through. So, you're not going to start any building for a couple of years. So it's just something we have to go through. But the master study will position ourselves better for future growth as the system moves. And so thank you, Joe. I just wanted to highlight that. Questions? Mr. Paulson.
Sam?
Go ahead.
Well, to the last point about Hammond, the exterior of the building, you'd be talking about taking the shingles off and putting new shingles on and putting sheeting underneath it, perhaps, basically?
It needs it, but there's no plan at the moment to do that.
Well, let me ask my question then. We have a vocational school. They provide labor over here, and they did it for the church. Have we thought about perhaps having them come over as a project? It would seem to be right down their alley.
They're not certified for lead removal.
This I'm asking about the outside. I'm asking about the outside, which are shingles.
Yes, the outside is all lead paint.
Those are shingles, and there's lead
no,
paint.
That have been painted.
Some, but mainly all trim around all the windows, all the trim in the building, out in the exterior of the building still contains.
I don't want to make too
the
much
lead
of
paint.
this, but if the shingles don't have lead paint on them, maybe the trim does. So
Right.
maybe just to think about saving money to get the students over here to take the shingles off, to put the new sheeting underneath and re-shingle it.
After we get our master plan, I'm sure we'll look at that.
Next question, an observation. I look here and I see, and it's a question I asked when Scott was here, and so you get to feel this also. I look at the special ed, and I add up these 9, 10, 11, 12 categories, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000, give or take. But right underneath that is the Minot band and music salaries at zero. And I find that, and I imagine most people in this room would agree, I find that to be very regrettable. I guess on a historic basis, did we used to have a band and music program?
Actually, it's a housekeeping issue.
Yeah, me
Those
too.
salaries fall under the teacher salary line item. So we do have a music teacher at the elementary, and she does teach band and chorus.
And
And
how
we
would
have
that,
an art teacher.
Right.
and how would that compare to, say, previous years?
It's been the same. We've always had music, we've always had band and chorus, we have art, phys ed. So we have all the fine arts at the elementary school.
The cut has been at this level at the middle school, where we had 2 music teachers and 2 art teachers, that it was cut to 1 each, so that you don't have a separate person that basically just teaches band any longer, where we had that previously.
And Mr. Paulson, actually, we haven't used that actual account in over 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Historically, the DECUS, also band and music instructor, had been paid out of that. But as far as reporting goes for our general, our end-of-year report for the department, we intentionally are not using that so that we can actually credit those costs to the direct schools. So this way, the DECUS staff is under DECUS and the Minot staff is under Minot.
Terrific, thank you.
And unfortunately, the accounting system, once we do not use an account,
You can't get rid of it.
they won't allow us to delete it, because of, you have to be able to compare in previous years.
questions. One, on the music and the art, do they have a dedicated room?
No.
Okay.
It depends which subject. Right now, the music teacher is using a room in one of the portable classrooms that I have at Minot Forest. I had to assign her a classroom based on some medical issues. The art teacher does not have a classroom. She's on a cart, as is the study skills teacher. They both push their carts through the hallway, which gets tricky at lunchtime with classes passing and the use of the elevator. So it is on a cart. The portable classrooms do not have sinks, so the art teacher has to be creative when she's trying to do lessons with them.
My other question would be, I come from a long time ago, a different setup where I grew up. So I'm going to ask a question. If it sounds stupid, you can laugh at me. But in the arts and as well as in the music, if a student has an interest, is the town able to supply like an instrument or make some arrangements for art supplies and things for those particular skills?
Through my budget, we do purchase some art supplies. The art teacher also has an art auction at the end of the year where we auction off some student work, but we also auction off community work. So we have members from the community that would donate items, and we auction that off, and that gives her a little bit of a budget to use as well. Same thing with the music teacher. We have a small piece of the budget that she gets to use. When she has her concerts in the winter and the spring, she sells the CDs of the concerts, and again, it helps her a little bit of money in order to purchase things.
If I can, I'm just going to clarify the question that I think was asked. If a child wanted to play a trumpet, and I don't know if they start in third grade or what grade they actually start in, fourth grade, and the family didn't have the wherewithal to rent that instrument, does the music teacher have any instruments available for students that don't have the money to rent them?
She does have a limited supply of instruments.
Is in both areas of arts and music, is it sufficient for the demand?
Yeah, yes it is. We haven't had any great need, or those who wanted to play so far have been able to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I want to make sure people understand, your art teacher, this auction raised about $2,000, so she basically doubles her supply line item by her own efforts every spring to be able to do this. As well as, it's one of the things when the art teacher wanted to do these headings around the building for respect and the mission of the school, they wrote a grant to the Foundation for Education for Wareham, and the art teacher was funded. So the teachers are very entrepreneurial about going out and getting what they need to be able to augment the budget.
If I might. I see a lot of intervention issues being, his initial presentation started with the elementary school, and you mentioned it. Is the stability of the school population a factor in this? Meaning, a long-time resident who we could expect started kindergarten going through to grade 12 versus a more transient population.
I know in our school improvement plan, we always report out on the transient population, which is around 11 to 13%. But a lot of these children are children that started with us in kindergarten.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Sam?
You mentioned the bulge in students going from the second to the third grade. Overall, has your student population increased much year to year?
It's basically increased a little bit in kindergarten this year, but we've been pretty steady for the past few years. Every year, kindergarten is our wild card. We never know how many children are going to be registering, so we never know if that population or that grade level is going to increase or not. So a few years ago, when these children were in kindergarten, we had an increase. But the past 2 years for kindergarten, it's been pretty much the same with a little bit of increase. I did notice, however, at Minot Forest this year, we did increase by about 35 children over the summer. We did have a lot of move-ins that happened this year.
And number of teachers
That has decreased.
has decreased.
Yes, last year I had 3 retirements. and because of budget issues, we did not replace the teachers, and I also had to eliminate my transitional first grade program. Because of a high enrollment in grade 1, I needed to transfer the teacher from that program to grade 1.
So in summation, your student population is increasing slightly, and the number of teachers is down 3 to 4?
I'd say 3.
Down 3. Thank you.
Just to put that in historical perspective, I did a trend analysis of students in this district, but also throughout the Cape and Islands. There is a dramatic drop in public school students across the Cape and Islands, including Bourne and Wareham. Over the last 10 years, the student population has dropped 25%. The most, yes, 20, you heard me correctly. Just to put that in absolute numbers for you, in 1999, there were 6,822 students across all these districts, and we're down to almost just a little above 4,000. So to say it's dramatic is an understatement. Barnstable School District, for example, has lost 25% of its population over this course of this period, and they've gone from, I'm sorry, the numbers I just gave you were Barnstable, sorry, 6,800 to a little over 4,000. The system as a whole has used to be, is down to about 30,000, so we've gone from this, a peak of 30, call it 37,000 10 years ago to about 30,000 now. Now, that's despite the fact that we've been relatively stable. So you can see other districts, Bourne has also been relatively stable. It's the other side of the bridge that has just plummeted, and there are literally only 3 exceptions to this growth pattern. One is Nantucket, for whatever reason, and the other 2 exceptions are the 2 vocational schools. So where you have differentiation, so to speak, you've grown 8–10%. Every place else has shrunk, with Bourne and Wareham being the most stable of all the ones that we're talking about. So it's a dramatic issue, so dramatic that the Cape is really literally wondering what to do about it, because they've got vacant buildings everywhere.
Am I correct that Wareham over those years has stayed stable, just about stable for 10 years?
We are down about 7%.
Down 7% in
Yes.
that 10 years?
Yes,
Okay.
compared to much larger percentages. So we peaked at about 3,600, and that 7% was let's see, let me just not guess here. We peaked at a little bit, about 3,600 about 10 years ago, and we're down to a little over 3,000.
While Joan is here, are there any other questions? Because on deck is the principal of the Deacon School.
Things as repetitive as I always am. What I think I heard is that basically in the minor, you're requesting 2 full-time equivalents.
Yes,
or
that is
half-time
correct.
positions. The Hammond, I think I missed that. Is there a request there for
I
full-time
did not,
equivalent?
I did not add
These 2
one.
full-time equivalents would cover Hammond as well.
We covered Hammond as well.
They would share the duties.
Thank you.
Just more a comment than a question. I had dinner with a lady who grew up in Finland on Friday night, and I couldn't resist talking about education, since Finland, along with Singapore, is held up as, you know, the pinnacles of public education. Her comments were very interesting. First, she said, "You have no idea how homogeneous the population is." I mean, basically, everybody's the same, and the respect for authority is amazing. So to manage, for example, 35, 40 kids in a classroom is not that difficult, because everybody behaves and everybody's the same. But the one comment that I was most surprised about is they don't even start their kids until age 7. So and then it's relatively accelerated, so you finish at about the same time. My question is, what are your thoughts about that? When you're dealing with 5-year-olds and all of the immaturity that's associated with that, do you ever wish you didn't start kids until they were 7?
With the demands that we have in our state and our society, no. I wouldn't want to start them later because we have some children that really are not getting instruction at home. Things have changed. They're playing video games. They're not watching educational shows on TV. They don't have the skills that you would like to see them. And I would really be concerned if we started at age 7 and they had missed all of these pre-readiness skills that they need to read.
Which gets to parenting, I suppose.
It does. Yep.
One of Dick's favorite subjects.
In communities where you have the large gap in achievement, and you look at the economic of the mean income, like at Chelsea, one of the techniques they've used is actually starting earlier. So where we may, we have a small preschool program that starts at age 3. They did a preschool program available for all of their children, so that instead of kindergarten and preschool, you had a preschool, because the thinking process is the longer that you have children, or the earlier that you have them, the more control you have over their developmental beginning of literacy, because it's all about children being read to and being exposed to literacy. And that's why if your mother has graduated college, the percentage of you doing well is much greater than if mom hasn't.
Of course, I remember vividly reading science fiction books where kids were taken at birth and just became the responsibility of society to educate the children.
I believe we have a long-standing history of that in Israel.
And soon we'll have robots to provide that reading to... No, just kidding.
Any other questions for Joan? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come on down, Chris. Anna, please make sure that I give you this. This was left for you by Wendy at the last meeting. I picked it up for you,
Morning, Chris.
put it in my budget book, and I've been carrying it around. So I will try to get to the right slide.
Good morning.
And the deepest starts on page 2 of the comparative report that you have.
Usually I do. God, I wasn't anywhere near it.
I'm sorry.
We saw you do that, Dick.
No, Dick's being the gracious gentleman, and I'm spelling it twice. How about if you take that one?
No, that's all right.
No, please.
No. I just want you to sign this. Perfectly all right.
No.
I wouldn't worry about it.
insist.
It certainly doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I'm going to
No.
Dick, can I insist that you take the fresh copy, please?
That's not mine.
No, this is a good
Please
talking
insist
point.
for me.
I'm going to give Samuel's change.
You just don't understand blackmail.
Okay, if we may bring you back to our focus here. And I'd like to introduce Mrs. Panarisi, the principal of the John W. Deacus Elementary School.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And so now we have the nice picture of the bus lobby, and we move on to the chart of accounts. And these again are the chart that Chris has control over.
Basically, what I've done is every account except for the ones that I'll speak about, and I think there are 3, I raised by 3% just to cover the inflation. That doesn't necessarily mean that I need any more money. What that means is that shipping costs will be more, and so that might, impact the cost of goods might be more depending upon the energy increases and things like that. So that's what that 3% is for. But the first line item that sticks out like a sore thumb is the textbook one. And mind you that my school is a school that is struggling to make AYP, specifically in the area of ELA. So this budget was formed by myself and my school council with one goal in mind, and that was to increase student achievement. We proposed to do that using 4 objectives, and the 4 objectives are supported by this budget. The first objective is to continue on with our response to intervention to make sure that we catch the kids before they fail. That is key in making sure our students achieve to the best of their ability. And we're doing a really nice job of that so far. We've got our rollouts coming out, and we're really making very good progress in that area.
I'm sorry, Chris, you have your
rollout of those programs.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Said rollout.
The other one is that the implementation of the Common Core curriculum throughout Massachusetts, and that's coming up in 2014. The state standards are what we used before, but now we have this common curriculum which requires us to do a little bit more in the area of informational text and writing and things like that. We do not have the resources to support that at my school, yet those are the requirements which we're all going to be judged on according to MCAS and all of the other assessments. And so when we look at Massachusetts as a state, they have said that we're going to follow the Common Core. We have to follow it. We don't get any extra money for that, and we're supposed to have all of these resources, which we do not have. So to tell you that we have those resources, we do not. Yet we are mandated to follow the Common Core. So that transition in itself costs the district an enormous amount of money. Then we have, I need to provide some consistency in instruction, assessment, and the intervention. That is where that big piece for that textbook series comes in. Right now, again, DECUS is struggling in the AYP area, specifically in ELA. And so when I'm looking at my teachers, I'm looking at the students that are sitting in front of me, you know, what can we do? What can we help our kids with? And there is a series that helps with language, because a lot of our children are coming in with language difficulties. And Ms. Rotella has investigated this, and I personally believe that that series would be a good series for our kids because they are coming to us with a low language ability. This series would help us not only to make sure that we are providing a comprehensive ELA program, it would also fall in line with the Common Core, and it would help us to our goal to increase student achievement. And then the fourth one is the increase of the supervision of staff and students. You know, a safe school is a school where a child can learn. Our school has 700 students. We are the second largest school combined in Wareham, is the DECUS school, and they're all on one site. And it's myself and an assistant principal. And if you looked at the other schools, everybody has additional help when it comes to supervising the schools. The DECUS school population had dropped. And so therefore, years ago, what we did is we got rid of that second AP position, naturally, because the population count had gone down. Well, our population over the past few years has managed to go up. And now we are 700. We are actually larger than the middle school. So when we are talking about 700 students, we're also talking approximately 90 staff members in that building as well, supporting those children. So the additional funds for that position I'm requesting too, because it is necessary, and especially with the adoption of the teacher supervision. So the textbook account is increased by $62,000. And that is to cover the first year payment for the adoption of the Common Core, bless you, and the implementation of a new ELA program.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. What's that for?
It's for the implementation of the Common Core that we have to all transfer to, and a new ELA series, specifically centered around reading and writing. The next large item, that you see is $4,132. That's a large increase. With great technology, and we were most fortunate to receive a grant, and we receive another grant as well for technology. We purchase technology. The upkeep of the technology becomes an issue. It becomes one that it costs more because you have more. And so when you have batteries that need to go in remotes and student responders and wires and just things that naturally wear out that you need more things of, it's our hope that we have technology in every single classroom, so that is just one more way that we can use to teach, to hope that our children are getting what they need as far as delivering that instruction. So that had been previously cut the year before, but I see it as needing to be reboosted again. And then there's equipment and repairs. We had a couple of our vacuum cleaners kind of go on the blink. When they go out to get fixed, there's always that thin line. Do I replace it or do you fix it? And you know, it's just enough in that cost for repair to make it worth, okay, we're just going to repair it. But with a building that large, it does require, you know, equipment, and that equipment breaks down. I mean, just to replace some of the light ballasts, I believe, just on the maintenance side, is $50, and then to have it done by an electrician is another $50. So for everyone that replaces is $100. There are some additional textbook funds that we're going to need, because as the Minot School, we have a bubble of students going from the 4th grade to the 5th grade. The 5th grade has not had 6 classroom teachers in it for a very, very, very long time. Therefore, the support materials, the teacher resources need to be provided inside that additional 5th grade class for next year. The textbook account was talked about in the computer and the inflationary. There is also a request for $36,000 in salaries to hire 2 part-time RTI interventionists. And what the interventionists do are they're certified teachers, and they take students in small groups, and they work with students to competency in mastery of skill. So students that are falling behind, we catch them, and we provide them with additional instruction. I have also asked for $33,000 in salaries to hire tutors for after school to support our students that do not make the SAS criteria, which is that low income criteria. Many of our students in DECUS is hovering 50% or a little bit more than 50% free and reduced lunch.
49.4.
49.4, Ms. Miranda, thank you very much. 49.4 free and reduced lunch, and I believe we're upwards of 20% on the special education population. But that being said, we need to look at the other children that need the tutoring, but they don't make the financial criteria for it, and they're not special ed, yet they still have a need. And so that $33,000 is something I'm hoping to get so that we can actually offer those services to students. And of course the $85,000 for the additional of the assistant principal. Along with the increases in enrollment come increases of paperwork, kindergarten registration. We have over 100 dismissals every single day at the DECUS school, and we have parents coming in and visiting. And to have one school year secretary and not have 2, full year secretaries and not have 2, really puts us behind in paperwork. There are many things that could be done over the summertime that we can really get, you know, ahead of and make sure things are in order before we start school. And so right now the building is only supported by 1 full year secretary and 1 school year secretary. And so I'm asking for 2 full year secretaries. And then our communication system and the fire and security. The fire control board has been an issue for years in our building. At times it says that certain parts of the building can hear it and certain parts can't. We have it tested, it seems to work, but then sometimes it's a little off. It's not consistent. The telephone system is another. I've used the last available line. So when my teachers are looking for telephones to use to call parents because they don't want to use their personal phones, and I can't say that I blame them on that, there's not enough lines coming into Deacon's. And because we have such a large increase in enrollment, there's a real problem. There are times when every single line on that telephone is lit and you cannot get through. And then there's also the intercom system. We just had one intercom system repaired in one room, and it was close to $450 because of the speaker. The wires are just, they're rotting away. They're just not making it. So I would not want to go ahead and spend $500 for each room. I think that we have to start at least looking at communications in extreme importance for safety inside the building, and that there are issues there. But some of the justification, I just would like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Deacon's School. In 2004, there were approximately 38 staff members, classroom teachers, teaching between the West School and the Deacon's School. And they taught a little bit over 700 kids, I think 711, somewhere around there. Today, we have 31. That's 7 less classroom teachers. We're not talking special ed teachers. We're not talking specialists. We're talking classroom teachers. Direct services to students. And I have 700. I believe I just got my 700th student today. I have 700 students. So when we look at class sizes and we look at this whole picture of achievement and student achievement and what we're giving our kids, we have to take into consideration that right now I'm working off 21, 22, 24 to a class, where in 2004 and 5, somehow I managed to work at 17, 18, or 19. And looking at the administration budget for our town and for our school district, it has consistently gone down. It has not gone up. And I'm certainly a great buy. So, that being said, I'm asking for your help. I need for your help to prioritize, what is important for our kids. I'm being honest. I'm giving you the needs of our building and the needs of the children. And I need support in that. And I just, sometimes you come here and we all say the same thing every single year, and then we all go back. There's no more I can cut. There's absolutely nothing else. At some point, some courageous person is going to have to make the claim that they're going to have to ask for more. And I don't know who that person is or who that committee is, but now is the time. Questions?
I have a question. Just going back, and you looked at 2004 versus now, say 7 years later, and you gave us some figures here in terms of the teacher population and the student population. Can you give us some sense as to what your sped costs were, say 7 or 8 years ago versus what they are today? Just ballparking it.
Mr. Luzon or Ms. Miranda, can you help me out with that? They're my historian.
About 7 to 8 years ago, the percentage of special education students at the Deacon's School hovered between 12 and maybe 15%. If you look at it now, it's up closer to 20%. So again, every percent increase in costs, whether it's staff, materials, and the whole 9 yards. There's been a significant increase with the special ed population at Deacon's historically.
In dollars?
In dollars and in numbers of students.
I don't have a ballpark figure, I have a ballpark percentage. So I'll show a slide a little bit later. For the in-district special education costs, Deacon's currently is approximately 19% of the special ed budget in district, not total special ed budget. That percentage is pretty flat. So if you were to look at the 2004 budget, you're going to be pretty close at taking 19% of the in-district special ed.
But if I could just add one statistic for the Deacon's School, At the same time that her student body is increasing right now, her free and reduced lunch percentages are increasing. Her students who are considered at risk by federal and state standards has more than, it's almost doubled, not quite, but almost doubled to what it was when I came in 2004.
The other thing that I would add to that related to special education, and you'll see a slide about it a little bit later, is that with our out-of-district population, if you took a very modest percentage of increase over the last 7 years, and I'll show you a 7-year slide, we would be asking for about $300,000 more than what they're asking for out-of-district, just adjusting for increases in tuition rates for out-of-district schools. The reason that's so is that we are handling many more of our students in district than out-of-district currently. So as a result of that, the Deacon's School has several substantially separate programs for children with very significant disabilities. And the way that we account for special education in this district is that it falls into the Deacon's budget, but in fact these are district programs that we have at the Deacon's School, at the Minot School, and the middle school and high school.
In our most severe population at Deacon's, we have a lower learning center with cognitive and emotional, students with cognitive and emotional needs, and an upper learning center. If you combine those two programs together, you have approximately 20 students in those programs. And then we have 4 students in the adjustment classroom that I have. So there are 3 separate, substantially separate classrooms and supports that go along with that. And they also take approximately 19% of my building, so that's funny that that percentage would work out that way.
And those are district programs. Those
Yes.
service Deacon's
Yes.
district as well as the east side as well as the west
Yes.
side.
And I am the ELL school for the district.
Mr. Sweat.
2 things, and the first subject, I promise, is the last time I will bring it up today. And it's the less important of the 2 comments I wanted to make. As Chris pointed out, she's now the 2nd largest school. She's not that many students less than the high school, in the reality. And yet, and she has about 20% fewer teachers. But her substitute budget is literally half of the high school. So it's another anomaly that we need to better understand. And by the way, her use of days off for any reason, sick, personal, business, professional, etc., is almost exactly the same as the high school. So that's another example of the anomaly we need to better understand. But I'd like you to put some flesh on the bones of what further reductions in staff would mean to your attempts to improve academic achievement. Would you talk about the RTI program and the difficulties of implementing the RTI program with, say, 25 kids versus 20 kids, and how the RTI program works, the 20-15-5? Just put some flesh on the bones so people understand the reality of what you're trying to do.
If I look at, let's just take, I'm going to take 1 grade, bless you. If I take the 5th grade, I know automatically in my 5th grade, I have approximately 5 to 6 non-readers. For whatever reason, the interventions that were put in place, or any of the strategies that have been put in place, are in the 5th grade. These students can't read. So for intervention, this particular core group of students, the most extremely intensive group that is taught, go out with 1 person. Now, you really should have 2, because students of that higher need, you're only supposed to really group probably 1-to-1 at the very most, 2, possibly 3. But to group an entire group of students with 1 teacher when you're doing an intervention is not the way to get to kids to achieve. It's, you try your best, you do what you can, but it's not that research-based success story that we read about, because we are incapable of doing what exactly the research tells us to do because we do not have the manpower. So what we do is we do the best we can. And the best we can is to put these 5 children with the most highly talented teacher that can help these kids learn to read. And that is my tier 3. And there isn't just one group, because there may be one group of special needs students or not special needs students that need a specific program in reading that requires a multi-sensory input where there's tapping involved and different strategies that we teach our kids for them to read. So they're off by themselves over here. Then we have another group of students that have a very structured intervention program, another research-based program that we put possibly 8 to 10 kids in. Not supposed to have 8 to 10 kids, but we put 8 to 10 children in there because we do not have the manpower to split these children up appropriately. So again, here we have this research base because as a school not making AYP, everything that we do must be research-based, evidence-based for success, or they don't want us to do it and it's against the rules. So everything we do is very methodical when it comes to student intervention. However, the grouping of the students is not because we have too many students of such high need. Then we come to other students that perhaps maybe just need another round of teaching, perhaps maybe a little bit of extra practice, and that group is massive. And that group, that little middle group, is probably, you should be breaking those kids up into 10, maybe 10, 8 to 10, and they're not. There's like 20 or 22, because I can only pluck a certain amount over here and a certain amount over here. So the class size really kind of stays the same, because if I have 5 fifth grades and I'm taking one, kid of real need from every grade, I've only lowered that classroom count down by 1. So we're doing intervention not exactly the way we should be doing because we don't have the manpower, but we're doing the best we can, and we are seeing some results. Are they the best results that we can see for a school that's in my position? No. Is it the optimal? No. But it's what we can do, so that's what we do. So what the interventionists do is they lower that size so that you can really work with the child. That child needs to read to you, you need to read to the child, there needs to be direct instruction, there needs to be practice. All of those foundational skills at the elementary level are what support the middle school and high school being successful. And if they're not there and they're not in place and they're not being paid attention to, then that's where those cracks are. And we have our clients, so to speak, or our society is a society that I have of at-risk students with over 50% in my school. That's my reality, that's what we deal with, and we do the best that we can. So to think that I could cut another teacher, I don't know where I would. My class sizes would soar. I've already cut a teacher last year in first grade, and now my first grade classes are up to 22, that's your reading year. That's what kids learn to read. So if any classroom you want with low numbers in it, it's that one. I don't know where we do it. I mean, you would have classes up to 28 at the elementary level. And that's just not good practice. And most definitely not good practice in your kindergarten, first or second grades.
Jeff, I think, wanted to
I
clarify.
have to add the following. First, if you go to the Mass Budget and Policy Center, you will see a PowerPoint presentation or the equivalent about where the money is going in the state of Massachusetts. With the exception, and I want to underline, with the exception of the upper 20th percentile of communities in terms of wealth, every other community, i.e. 80%, is experiencing something similar. And they are simply reducing the number of regular teachers because they don't have the money, and they are putting it into 2 areas. Special education, both inside the district and outside the district, and health care premiums, health care for the employees within the district. That's where the money is going. 80% of the communities are doing exactly the same thing. The data says it's very clear. They're simply reducing the number of regular education teachers within the district. Other thing I will add is a conversation that I had. I was at a statewide meeting of school committee members. It was a board meeting of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. And the following conversation took place. Basically, it surrounded what do we do about this phenomenon that the 80% of the Commonwealth doesn't have enough money to educate its children. And at one point they said, and one of the things we can't afford to do is actually revisit education reform that happened in the early 1990s and have the court order the state to properly fund public education. And I said, and that would be a bad thing because? And they said, well, because then the legislature would be confronted with the fact that they can't afford to do it. And I said, and that would be a bad thing because? So we are all basically being blackmailed out of fear that we would be forced to look hard at the priorities about how we spend our money in this state. And I, for one, want to disassociate myself with that, from that fear, and I hope some parent, and if I had a child, I would do it, I hope some parent has the courage to do what another parent did in the early 1990s and say, enough is enough. There is not equal opportunity for education in this state. So Chris talked about courage at the beginning of her, or the middle, or wherever it was in her presentation. I think we need to have the courage to admit that the state has failed now about 80%. I'll repeat what I may have said once before. We used to be the anomaly. That is to say, we were one of a dozen or so communities being funded at minimum. We are no longer an anomaly. About a third of the communities in the state are now finding themselves at minimum because they couldn't afford to keep up with the demands of providing education. So now we just basically have the upper 20th percentile spending whatever they need to provide the education that their children demand, and everybody else is cutting. That's the end of my speech.
I'm looking at your teacher salaries, and it's gone from 2.27 million to 2.3 million, 380, an increase of $153,000. I know it's a loaded question, but how many will actually result in specific teachers in your classroom? And I'm expecting an answer like 0.
There are two additional positions here. It's the expansion of the instructional leaders that we talked about. All right, but these are the other half, the interventionists. So we had 2 half-time interventionists. They have now been made 2 full-time interventionists, which is an additional FTE for that goes into this, plus the collective bargaining agreement and the going to the master's degree.
I was afraid that was what you were going to tell me.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
It's true, 2 other positions.
everybody has to go to the master's degree. And that's another state, and not to really hate the state say, this is not what I'm trying to do here. But the state does make these mandates.
Yes.
You're going to observe teachers every single year. Okay, we're going to do that. You're going to transition to Common Core. Okay, we're going to do that. And also, you know, every teacher that gets their license now, you're going to have to get your master's. In the old days, and we have had people here within 5 years, so now this is a huge thing in our budget. And of course, DECUS, I think, I'm willing to bet you we've probably turned around anywhere from 30 to 40% of the teachers. A lot of our teachers have retired, and we have new teachers. But here again, they have to get their master's degree in order to keep their license, which now brings them up on that contract, and so now you're forced with paying those. And then you're at actual steps. So when you're looking at it from that point of view, those are three things and 3 directives that the state has given us, but they haven't provided us any additional funding to support that. Yet it's something we're supposed to do. And so when we come here and I look at these things, I knew that what I was asking for, and I in no way mean any disrespect to the committee at all, I realize it looks like it's a lot and unrealistic. But I'm looking at it as saying, if I were a school, any school in Massachusetts, what would I need to get things right for our kids? And I didn't want to water it down just because I happened to choose to work in Wareham. I wanted to say, these are the initiatives that are coming through from the state. This is what we need to give our children an adequate, just adequate, not even off the charts, an adequate education. And not every level of spending, it has to be equal for every child, but every child has to get what they need. And that's where Mr. Luzon runs into that problem.
Just a footnote
Could
to Dave's.
Also clarify that at Deacon's, two of those teacher positions were funded by grants that now
Thank
no
you.
longer exist. Ed Jobs had funded 2 additional positions, and that had to be built back into the Deacon's teacher salary budget.
Just a point of information to Dave's point about salaries. One of the interesting things about the Mass Budget and Policy Center data was that it turns out that what the teachers are being paid on average across the state is pretty much exactly what Ed Reform and the foundation anticipated they would be paid. In other words, the formula, the problem in the formula is not that teachers' salaries are too high or too low. They're exactly where they anticipated they would be. It's the number of teachers that has shrunk in anticipation. People are not, in other words, people are not cutting because they're paying teachers more than anticipated. They're cutting because of the healthcare and the special education. Sorry.
Could I also add that in terms of the teacher salaries, both at Deacon's and Minot, the interventionist positions, the 2 half-time positions, I just want to clarify that those are actually bringing us back to the point that we were to be at this year, because we were using half of the instructional leader's position as an interventionist. So the increase of 2 part-time interventionists at Minot, 2 part-time interventionists at Deacon's is simply bringing us back to the level that we had hoped to have for this year, although we'll have all of the grade levels receiving the interventions, the service delivery being in place. So I just want to say that I'm concerned about that number. We will live with that number, but it is extremely conservative in terms of the amount of intervention that we're going to need. And part of the answer to that is going to be that we are requiring more of our special education staff to not be working a portion of their day being working in the tiered interventions, so we're reallocating them to regular education so that we can help support the efforts in this tiered model of RTI.
Sam.
I have a couple of questions just on the population numbers, just so I understand it. I understand there are about 700 students.
Yes,
And 31 teachers?
31, I believe, classroom teachers. Classroom teachers.
Classroom teachers. Now, you mentioned a staff.
1 second, Sam. That's not the data that I have. So if
Let me add
we're
up.
looking at regular teachers, and I had Deacon's right here. All right, so here's Deacon's. So this year, regular teachers, now that includes
My specialists.
your specialists.
I'm not
So
including
this
my
isn't,
specialists.
all right. So
That's, I guess.
she's not counting her
Yeah.
gym teacher and art
Music,
teacher and
art.
music teacher.
Study skills, they're not counted.
Okay,
Because
so-
I'm more focused
so
on
you-
class size.
You mentioned staff of 90.
Yes.
And I guess where I was aiming at was I was trying to figure out what the other
68.
59 people were, and I assume that they're teaching, but
You're right.
not counted as
It's not teachers.
teachers. Is
Paraprofessionals, custodians, cafeteria, all, when she says 90, that would be like the October 1
facility,
count.
the site.
Counting every body
I
that works in the
understand
building.
that.
So, paraprofessionals you'd have to add.
57 are licensed people.
57?
Licensed.
Regular, special ed, therapists, counselors, psychologists, librarians. That adds up to 57 point, actually, it would be a little bit less. It would be about 55, because that includes, it says facilitators, all right, 57.56. That includes all licensed people. If we then add the paraprofessionals, to that, it comes out to 68.3. But as Chris said to me, that does not include the custodians or cafeteria workers.
On the spreadsheet you gave me once upon a time,
Yeah.
Okay.
this has 80, not 90. Would you agree that 90 is not correct? Because I'd like to give this to Sam, because it's for FY12, not FY13, but it's a
Right.
great breakdown.
Yeah, that's probably more accurate.
Yeah, as long as you promise to replace it, I'll be glad to hand it down.
I'm sure Michelle has it. We gave it to you,
Thank you,
Michelle
Jeff.
has it.
We're not going to let you narrate any paper.
Thank you.
Dick?
This is a kind of a Star Wars observation at a time long and long ago and everything. When I was a kid, we had an interventionist. It was called a mother, or father, or
That's right.
or grandmother.
Yes.
You've got these, and I'll take the 5 kids who can't read. What are you doing with the parents? What are you doing with the adult? What happens there? Why does the school have to do this? Why aren't we dragging the parent? Maybe we are. And dragging, I probably should put it a little more gently, asking the parent to come in, or whomever the adult is, to say, child doesn't read, can you help? Do we do that?
Yes, we do that. And we
And?
start that at the early grades. But as you know, there are some parents that embrace that and do it automatically. There are others that we kind of prod to move along. And then there are others that the children are basically raising themselves.
That gets to my next question. These different tiers, can you give us some senses, and it's a small sample, I understand, so understand the question in that context. Can you give us some sense as to how many of these children are coming from foster homes, homeless, and have parents? I mean, just as a...
Why don't you allow Bob to handle the homeless
So
and foster?
the homeless across the district, the last one-day count that I did for homeless children was 73. And for foster children, it had actually decreased slightly from what it's been in the past, and that was approximately 57. That's a one-day count. It changes every day.
But,
How
but,
many?
57.
but how many of those don't read? That's what I'm getting at. They would seem to be the ones that are at risk, to me. I may be wrong
They're
on
not.
that. They're not.
Not necessarily.
Okay, all right.
They're not representative so that I could look and say, it's this population of student. It's not.
All right, not to belabor the point, from my standpoint, I'll try to be a little clearer here. Coming back to the parents who, or the children who are, you say, are in effect educating themselves, can we do nothing with those parents, nothing with the person that's at home? Again, in my era, all the teacher had to do was call my home, and that was it.
Right.
Bingo. And the same is true of every kid, the best students, the worst students.
I know.
There was no problem.
His mother was home and she answered the phone.
That's right.
And I was, you know what, I hate to say this, but I was thinking about that this morning because I'm struggling with a parent that I'm trying to get in for a meeting. She can't come before school, and or if she comes before school, it has to be at 7 o'clock in the morning, and my teachers really, they can't get there for 7. They don't mind coming in early to meet and accommodate a parent, but 7 o'clock in the morning is a lot to ask, and they can't stay till 5. And I'm dancing around, and I'm dancing around with this woman, and she wants to, have this meeting and that meeting, and it's not just one parent, it's quite a few parents. They don't have the time or the priority, so to speak, to say, this is important, I need to be there. Even with attendance, and I send the letters, and I ask parents to come in, and I keep hounding them to come in. A lot of parents don't have the time, nor is it their priority. Now, it's an inconvenience, okay, to have to go to a child's meeting with the teachers. I've had to do it myself, and then you're late for work, or then you have to take a half a personal day, which means now your personal day can't be spent as a personal day because you need to go into conference. But that's part of being a parent. That's what you do. It's what is necessary. And so that type of sacrifice, it isn't a sacrifice, it's your job. But
If I can intervene,
I'll go too far.
the percentage that you're asking for if we have 20% of our children who are in special education, I would venture an educated guess, based on 39 years in the business, that we have approximately another 20% of our children who come from homes that cannot be as supportive as they would like to be, because life is difficult for them, because they're either a single parent in that household or the grandparent is bringing up that child. The person has to work to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. Circumstances occur when you are dealing with a percentage of people who make, if our mean income per household is $40,000, okay, we're talking about people who maybe make half of that and are trying to keep everything going. So it isn't that they don't want a parent. Perhaps they haven't had the best experience when they were children themselves. So I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. We try to work with all the parents. One of the beauties of this community, it is diverse economically as well as culturally, and we need to work and educate everyone. But in this community, if we don't pick up the children with buses and bring them to school, they won't come to school. If we don't go to them and say, I mean, and I know every single principal who's going to come before you, because I've done it and I know they do it, when you make the 7th call and nobody comes, you go and you knock on the door and you try to show up there. Or we ask our resource officer, because that's what we have to do to try to interface with that parent. So it is not, there is no silver bullet, not an easy answer, but it is discussion. We have our Title I program. As part of it, we have parenting classes, but I'm sure you'll probably guess that the people that all of us may say need those classes aren't the ones that come. It's usually the parents who are doing fine and have spent the time with their youngsters in reading and making sure they get into quality child care and so forth. So believe me when I tell you we try, we continue to try, and sometimes we hit a wall and we just need more help.
Transportation is also an issue. A lot of parents don't have transportation. Yes.
To Dr. Rabinovich's point, and to your point about parenting, some of us older people remember when mom stayed home. Well, that was all nice.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you again to speak up for
some of
the
us
older
older
people
people.
down here.
He said some of us more mature people.
Oh, all right, more
Okay.
mature people. Can
remember when mom was home when we went off to school.
And we can remember in the 50s, as society changed, they went to work in order to provide a standard of living to maintain their households. It was good and it was bad. The bad side you see when we talk about what are the parenting requirements, and the more mature people remember back when. The good side is we've put into our society 51% of the population that can provide many of the improvements that we have in our society. But
A lot of talented people.
Thank you. But the end result is it's now taking two parents in many cases just to keep a household
Yes.
in equilibrium or sinking slowly. The middle class is seeing their standard of living go down. I think Wareham is a good cross population of that. And I don't envy your job. I just like to think that there have been some really good changes in society, and there's been some sad changes.
And the stress level, too.
Yes.
And we're seeing the anxiety in the children more than I have ever seen. It just carries over.
I was at a recent middle school council meeting, and the data they presented, about half of the kids were living in essentially a single-parent home.
What I'd like to suggest
We have a
is
question
that,
here.
okay, that after this question, we break for lunch, because we'll only have 15 minutes before our next presenter on transportation comes in the door. And the good thing is that we have many rich conversations at this table. So after Dick's question, we will go to lunch break. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you very much, and this will be a very brief question. Do you know of any school systems in the United States, the whole country, where to tackle this question, the solution was or is to pay a stipend to the parent to educate their own child? Has anybody ever done that you know of?
I've been researching financing and funding for public education, and I have not found that. I have found school systems where they have set up residential halls for the students to be at school 24/7.
24/7.
They live at the schools.
Oh, it's like
They set
China.
up dormitories.
But no place where they say, here, parent, here's $1,000 or $2,000. But you get it if the kid learns how to read in the next year. Nothing like that.
Nothing that I've found.
Just a thought.
There are cases where somebody is hired as a professional parent liaison, and the job of that person is to provide transportation for parents to get to meetings, to reach out, and for people that have not had a positive experience at school, and when school calls and wants to talk to you, that's not something that some people want to make available. But with a liaison going into the home saying, we want to help your child and so forth, sometimes that works a little bit better. We have not found the funding for such a position.
However, voc tech, charter schools, private schools, and homeschooling are part of the reasons the Cape schools that I talked about earlier are shrinking.
Sure.
It's part of the dynamic of the competition, so to speak, that public schools are dealing with.
Right.
On that note, let's break for lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Lunch is provided.